Okay, so it's early, but there's really evidence of serious traction happening with the Donald Trump economy. And the initial post-election excitement that we saw is becoming hard and fast economic reality. Now, through the month of April, we're seeing a decided move in job creation and wages, and the market is on pace right now. This market could rally at 20% where we are now. That would put it above all of those most recent presidents. Now, one of the reasons for this is corporate earnings. Growth is beginning to accelerate, and this, of course, bodes well. And all of that confidence, by the way, that we saw brimming continues out of the executive suites since November of 2016, the election. And then finally, there's the consumer beginning to step up big time. Spending just now reaching a 5-month high. It's a trend that I personally see continuing as jobs continue to pick up and wages improve. Joining me now to discuss, Steve Cortes, Eric Beach, and Liz Peek. Liz, let me start with you. You know, a lot of people keep focusing on what parts of the Trump economic agenda haven't been passed in D.C. Yeah. I think they're missing the ball. The economy has started to move. Now, whether it's in anticipation of those things happening or not, the bottom line is we have pulled out of the station.
Yeah, there's no question that part of the optimism sprang from the fact that we would have tax reform and so forth. But look, I think the whole message out of Washington is just so radically different from the 8 years of Obama. We are open for business. And Donald Trump, more than anything, a win in his column is creating jobs. Businesses know that. They know that deregulation is taking place behind the scenes. As you say, it hasn't gotten much credit. But Donald Trump and the agencies, too, by the way, are basically slashing regulations as quickly as they can. But look, the proof's in the pudding. Earnings are up 14% in the first quarter, best quarter in 6 years or something like that. The next 3 quarters also look to be very strong. That's what you needed, and that's what we're getting.
See, Cortes, I know that President Trump's surrogates and those who really want to see the economic agenda put through, I feel like they come on TV sometime and they don't want to sound too rosy, or we may take our eye off the legislative ball. But the manufacturing renaissance, which I think is the epicenter of this, is really apparent, and it feels pretty good right now.
Right. No, and Charles, don't count me among those who don't want to appear too rosy. I mean, I am as rosy as it can get right now. Because let me tell you something, too. Donald Trump was elected, if we drill down on the election, he was elected by blue-collar workers, primarily in the Midwest. And thank goodness, those are the people who have been left behind by this slow economic expansion of the last decade. Those are the very people who are now, finally, at last, starting to really participate. And so what we're seeing going on, whether you look at the stock market, whether you look at surveys of the National Federation of Independent Business, consumer confidence, all of it, wages, all of it is starting to accelerate. So it's palpable what's going on in the country. I think what we need to do as a country, as citizens, as investors, is ignore the mainstream media, which wants to focus very much on the gnashing and wailing of teeth, gnashing of teeth and wailing in Washington, D.C., and focus instead not on what's going on in Washington, but what's going on in Waco.
You know, Eric,
and what's going on there is a lot of working.
Eric, you know who's ignoring them? Lower income and lower middle class folks. Earlier this week, the Conference Board put out the Consumer Confidence Report. Folks making $15,000 or less, confidence at a 16-year high. I mean, that's not confidence in government giving you a greater handout. That's confidence in I'm going to have the ability to pull myself up by the bootstraps.
Look, we all know that there's 600,000 jobs created, a lot of them in construction and manufacturing, and much of what the other guests have said is accurate. But one other thing that hasn't been mentioned is his American first policies, and that's being followed by the marketplace. There is really an unwritten, if you want to, battle between nationalism and globalism, and we're seeing that play out here in the marketplace with some of his policies. We're talking about tax reform. Of course, you saw the Paris Treaty Accord today, pulling out of that. Every time Donald Trump signals to the rest of the world that he's going to put Americans first with his policies, the markets jump up. It's just the proof is in the numbers. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the year plays out and we can reach that 20% threshold.
Liz, are you concerned still? The main concern that Wall Street had was a trade war. Earlier this week, Wilbur Ross said he's ready now to start renegotiating some mega trade deals. To me, that's a positive. It doesn't sound like trade war to me.
Yeah, no, look, Wilbur Ross is not anti-trade. Trump is not anti-trade. I think when you look at, for example, the TPP, the big Asian multi-nation deal that was scuppered by Trump, the truth is America was not a big winner in that trade deal. The World Bank did an assessment. Vietnam, Thailand, and one other country, maybe Singapore, were going to win big. The United States barely at all. So Trump is not wrong here. The treaties have not been particularly written to benefit us. And by the way, NAFTA, which is up for renegotiation, everybody understands that there's a lot of stuff in there, forgetting who's favored and who's not, that is outdated and antiquated. So all of this makes sense. It's just, you know, sort of chattering heads, people going crazy because it isn't globalism. It's the opposite of that. It's what we're doing is good for the United States.
All right, guys, and speaking of TPP, don't forget the president of Vietnam came here this week and he left us with $17 billion in deals. So maybe those individual deals might make a lot more sense.